The first shot of laughter, sharp and glassy, pierced through my bedroom wall at 1:17 a.m. It was followed by the thumping bass of a song I didn't recognize, a vibration that seemed to originate in my very bones. I lay there, eyes wide open to the darkness, every muscle in my body coiled into a tight, furious knot. This was the 4th Friday in a row. The 4th Friday of my life being hijacked by the people on the other side of the drywall. My name is Clara Evans. I am 35 years old, and I was being held hostage by my neighbor's good time. I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling the pillow over my head. It was a futile gesture, like trying to stop a flood with a paper towel. The laughter grew louder, a woman's shrieking cackle that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. A bottle shattered. More laughter. The bass dropped again. This was it, the final straw. Not because of the sleep deprivation, though that was a special kind of torture. Not because of the thumping headache brewing behind my eyes. It was because of the profound, soul-crushing loneliness that their noise accentuated. Their joy was a spotlight on my own quiet, ordered and utterly solitary life. In the stark silence of my own apartment, I was just Clara, a graphic designer who worked from home, whose most exciting Friday night involved a new series on Netflix and a cup of tea that always went cold before the second episode. On their side of the wall, there was life, messy, loud, obnoxious life. I threw the pillow across the room. Enough. I'd tried being polite. Months ago, when they first moved in, I'd baked a pathetic batch of oatmeal raisin cookies, the universal language of timid neighborly outreach, and introduced myself. The guy who answered the door was maybe 25, shirtless with a tattoo of a geometric wolf on his chest. His name was Chad, or maybe Brad. Something that ended with a D and implied a fondness for frothy beers and tank tops. "Hey, how's it going?" he'd said, taking the plate without a hint of suspicion, as if half-naked women bearing baked goods were a regular occurrence. "I'm Clara, from next door," I'd said, forcing a smile. "Just wanted to say welcome to the building. The walls are a little thin, so if you ever have music on, just maybe keep it down after 10. "Oh, for sure, he'd said, nodding amiably. "No worries, we're chill." He'd glanced back into the apartment where a girl was dancing alone in the living room, earbuds in. "Appreciate the cookies." They were not chill. The first party happened that weekend. I'd knocked at 11:30 p.m., my robe tied tightly around me. The same girl from before, her name was Skylar, answered. Her eyes were glazed. "Yeah?" she'd said, blinking slowly. "The music? It's really loud. I can't sleep." "Oh, sorry." She'd closed the door without another word. The music had dipped for about 90 seconds before cranking back up, even louder. I'd called the building manager Mr. Henderson. He'd sighed, a long, suffering sound that traveled perfectly through the phone line. "Ms. Evans, again? I'll send them an email." He'd send an email, a strongly worded electronic missive into the void. I pictured it landing in Chad or Brad's spam folder between an offer for male enhancement and a plea from a deposited Nigerian prince. The parties continued. The noise was a constant, unpredictable torment. Sometimes it was on a Tuesday, sometimes a Saturday. It was the soundtrack to my client video calls, the background noise to my solitary dinners, the reason for the deep purple crescents permanently etched under my eyes. I became a creature of the night, but not by choice. I'd pace my apartment, a silent phantom in my own home, seething with a rage so pure and hot it scared me. I'd press my ear to the wall, not to hear the music, but to listen for clues. Who were these people who lived with such audacious noise? What gave them the right to colonize my peace? I started cataloging it, Not just mentally. I opened the Notes app on my phone. March 12th, party, 35 plus. People estimated. Bass-heavy electronic music. Lasted until 3:45 a.m. Called non-emergency police line at 1:30 a.m. No response. March 19th, loud argument. Male and female voices. Heard the phrase, "You always do this." Glass breaking. Considered calling police, did not. April 2nd, midweek kickback. Their term, overheard in the hallway. Smell of weed very strong, permeating my apartment. The weed was the final, nauseating layer. It was a skunky, sweet odor that clung to my curtains, my couch, my hair. It made me feel like a prisoner in a cloud of their second-hand indulgence. I wasn't just angry, I was eroding. My work was suffering. I'd snap at clients on Zoom. My creativity, my one reliable companion, had dried up and blown away. I was a husk, filled only with resentment for the people next door. My best friend Maya listened to my rants over lunch. "Clara, you have to move. This is insane. It's killing you." "I can't move," I'd whine, stabbing a piece of lettuce. "My lease isn't up for 8 months. The rental market is insane. This place was a steal." It was. A 1-bedroom with decent light in a good neighborhood. It was my sanctuary, or it had been before the invasion. "Then you have to do something more drastic," Maya said, lowering her voice even though we were in a crowded cafe. "Get a big speaker, blast opera against the wall at 7 a.m. when they're hungover." "I'm not them, Maya. I don't want to become them." "Then what? You just take it?" I didn't have an answer, but the question festered. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I had a monumental deadline, a branding package for a new eco-friendly yoga wear company. The founder was a nightmare, a woman who used phrases like "channel the essence of verdant growth" and "make the logo pop, but in a muted way." I'd been working on it for weeks, and this was the final 24-hour push. I'd made coffee. I'd put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I was in the zone finally, the creative juices flowing after a long drought. I was designing the perfect leaf motif when the bass started. It wasn't the full weekend party blast. It was just music, turned up too high for a weekday afternoon. Some rapper confidently listing his material possessions. The bass line was a repetitive, brain-jarring thump. Thump, 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 thump. I lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes of watching my concentration shatter into a million pieces. The verdant growth was now just an ugly green smear on my screen. I marched to my door, yanked it open, and stormed the 10 feet to theirs. I hammered on it with a closed fist, no longer caring about politeness. The music stopped abruptly. Footsteps, the door swung open. It was Chad or Brad, holding a video game controller. He smelled like weed and Cool Ranch Doritos. "Hey, neighbor," he said, a lazy smile on his face. "What's up?" "The music," I said, my voice tight. "It's too loud. I am working. I have asked you repeatedly. I have called the manager. Turn it down. Now." His smile didn't falter. It was infuriating. He wasn't angry or apologetic. He was amused. "Whoa, okay, easy there. It's just a little tunes. We're just gaming. I don't care what you're doing. Turn it down." From inside the apartment, Skylar appeared, draped over the back of the sofa. "Babe, who is it?" She saw me, her face soured. "Oh, it's you." "It's me," I confirmed, my hands shaking. "The person who lives here and would like to be able to think in her own home." "Jesus, it's the middle of the day," Skylar said, rolling her eyes. "Don't you have, a job?" The condescension, the utter lack of regard. It was a spark landing on a decade's worth of kindling. I saw red, literally a haze of pulsing crimson anger. Chad or Brad held up his hands in a mock surrender. All right. We'll keep it down. Sorry to, disturb your vibe." He winked. He winked at me. Then he closed the door in my face. I stood there in the hallway, trembling. The music did not come back on, but the victory was ashes in my mouth. I had been dismissed, patronized. I was the crazy, uptight neighbor, a minor annoyance in their vibrant, fun-filled lives. My reasonable request was a joke to them. I went back into my apartment, closed the door, and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. I didn't cry. I was past tears. I was in a cold, still place of absolute fury. Maya's words echoed in my head. "You have to do something more drastic." They couldn't be reasoned with. The manager was useless. The police, on the rare occasion they came, would just tell them to turn it down. It was a slap on the wrist, a minor inconvenience. They needed a consequence, a real one. I needed more than just a noise complaint. I needed leverage. And that's when the idea began to form. It was a dark, twisted little seed planted in the fertile soil of my rage. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But the image of Chad's smug, winking face blotted out any sense of morality. The weed, the constant pungent smell of it. It was illegal in our state, not decriminalized. Illegal. What if the police didn't come for the noise? What if they came for something else? The plan was terrifying in its simplicity. All I had to do was make the call. An anonymous tip. A concerned citizen smelling what was unmistakably the odor of a large-scale marijuana operation. I could layer it on thick. Say I'd seen people coming and going at all hours, looking shifty. It wasn't even a lie. I wrestled with it for 2 days. This wasn't me. I was the person who returned shopping carts to the corral. I paid my taxes early. I didn't even pirate movies. This was nuclear. This could ruin their lives. A drug charge was serious. But then on Saturday night, the party started again. And as the first bass notes hit the wall, something in me snapped into place. The guilt vanished, replaced by a cold, focused determination. They had made their choice over and over again. They had chosen their right to party over my right to peace. They had chosen to be terrible human beings. Now I would make a choice. I waited until the party was at its peak around 11 p.m. The music was louder than ever. The hallway smelled like a Grateful Dead concert. I didn't call the non-emergency line this time. I Googled the direct number for the local precinct's narcotics tip line. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I felt dizzy. I typed the number into my phone. Each digit was a monumental effort. A male officer answered on the second ring. "Narcotics, Sergeant Miller." I took a deep breath and pitched my voice higher, lighter, more anxious. I made it sound like I was whispering. "Hello? I want to report something. I don't want to give my name." "That's fine, ma'am. What's the situation?" "It's my neighbors in my apartment building. The smell of marijuana is overwhelming. It's every single day, all hours. And tonight there's a huge party. I've seen so many people going in and out. It looks like they're selling it. I'm really scared." I injected a convincing tremor into my voice. I gave him the address. Apartment 3B. I told him the music was so loud they'd never hear a knock, that they'd probably have to force entry. I painted a picture of a major drug den, a blight on our quiet building. Sergeant Miller was all business. "We'll check it out. Thank you for calling." I hung up. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I sat on my couch, knees pulled to my chest, and waited. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. Every second was an eternity. Had they believed me? Would they even come? What if they just knocked and Chad or Brad turned the music down and that was that? My plan would be for nothing. I'd be back to square one. Then I heard it. Not a knock. The shrill, unmistakable sound of the building's front door buzzer held down for a long, insistent time. Someone was downstairs, and they weren't asking nicely to be let in. The music in 3B dipped for a second. Someone had heard it. There were shouts. The music went back up. They were ignoring it. A minute later, I heard the heavy footsteps on the stairs. Not the light, drunken stumble of a party guest. These were purposeful, booted steps, more than one set. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. I crept to my door and looked through the peephole. 2 police officers in uniform stood outside 3B. One of them knocked, hard. I couldn't hear it over the music, but I saw the door vibrate. Nothing happened. The officer knocked again, harder this time. The music dipped slightly, then surged back. They were being defiant. The 2 officers looked at each other. One nodded. The other one took a step back, and then he kicked the door. It wasn't a movie-style one-kick splintering of the frame. It was a heavy, professional, powerful blow right next to the handle. The wood cracked audibly, even over the music. The door flew open. The music stopped mid-beat. The sudden silence was so absolute it was physically jarring. My ears rang with it. Then the silence was filled with voices. Shouts of police, search warrant, followed by screams and general panic from inside the apartment. I stayed at my peephole, my body frozen. I could see flashes of movement inside 3B. People with their hands up, officers moving through the crowd. I saw Chad or Brad, his face pale and stunned, being pushed against a wall and cuffed. Skylar was crying, hysterical, as an officer emptied her purse onto the coffee table. It was chaos. It was terrifying. It was everything I had wanted. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. An officer emerged from the back bedroom holding a large clear plastic evidence bag. It wasn't filled with little baggies of weed. It was filled with small, brightly colored pills. MDMA. Ecstasy. Another officer followed him, holding a digital scale and a stack of cash. This wasn't just a party with some weed. They were dealing. Seriously dealing. My anonymous tip about a weed smell had just stumbled into a real narcotics operation. I had not just gotten them in trouble. I had potentially destroyed their lives. The police cleared out the party guests with warnings, but they took Chad. I heard an officer say his name. It was definitely Chad and Skylar away in handcuffs. I watched from my dark window as they were put into separate squad cars. Chad's head was bowed. Skylar was still sobbing. The silence they left behind was profound. It was the silence I had craved for months. It was absolute, and it was awful. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the nothingness. Every creak of the building was an accusation. I had done this. I had set this in motion. My sweet revenge was a toxic thing, poisoning me from the inside out. I thought about the charges they would face. Possession with intent to distribute. A felony. Their lives were over before they'd really begun. Was a good night's sleep worth that? The guilt was a physical weight on my chest. I had become a monster. I was no better than them. I was worse. The next week was surreal. The silence was permanent. Apartment 3B was empty. A crime scene notice stuck to the broken door. The building was quieter than it had ever been. I could work. I could sleep. I could hear myself think. And I hated it. I was the pariah. Other neighbors in the building would see me in the hall and quickly look away. They knew I was the one who had called. They had to know. I was the only one who had ever complained. Whispers followed me to the mailboxes. She's the one. I heard she called the cops on a noise complaint, and they found... Mr. Henderson stopped me one afternoon. Well, Ms. Evans, he said, unable to meet my eye. You got your wish. Quiet enough for you? I just nodded and hurried away. I had won. I had gotten my revenge, and I had never felt more miserable. A month later, I was scrolling through my local community Facebook group, a digital monument to suburban boredom, lost dog posts, and complaints about potholes. My finger froze on the screen. It was a post from Skylar. Her profile picture was different. She looked older, tired. Hey, everyone, it began. I know a lot of you have heard what happened. I'm not here to make excuses. We were stupid and reckless, and we broke the law. We're facing the consequences. Chad is looking at some real time. My heart clenched, but I wanted to say, the post continued, that sometimes the biggest consequences aren't the ones from the court. We lost our home, our reputations. Our families aren't speaking to us. I lost my job. We were selfish and we disturbed a lot of people, and for that I am truly sorry. The apology felt real. It was raw and unvarnished. The reason I'm writing this, she went on, is that I'm trying to turn my life around. I've enrolled in community college. I'm going to study substance abuse counseling. I want to help people who are as lost as we were. It's a long road, but I'm trying. She ended the post with a plea for understanding and a link to a fundraiser to help with her legal fees and tuition. I put my phone down, my hands trembling. This was not the outcome I had imagined. I had wanted punishment, not annihilation. I had wanted remorse, not a life derailed. I clicked on the fundraiser link. There was a photo of Skylar, a genuine, hesitant smile on her face. The description was in her voice, more detailed than the Facebook post. She talked about wanting to make amends. The goal was $10,000. They had raised $820. I stared at the number for a long time. 820. From friends, family, a few sympathetic strangers, it was nothing. It wouldn't even cover a single lawyer's consultation. My revenge had been cold and calculated. But what was colder was the silence of the world after it had done its work. The world had moved on, leaving Skylar and Chad to drown in the consequences I had unleashed. An idea, even more insane than the first, began to form in my mind. It wasn't born of anger this time. It was born of guilt, yes, but something else too. A need for redemption. Not for them, for me. I couldn't undo what I had done. I couldn't take back the call, but I could, maybe, just maybe, change the ending. I went to my laptop and opened the fundraiser page. I clicked Donate Anonymously. I hesitated, my finger over the keyboard. Then I typed in an amount, not a small token amount, a significant one. The exact amount of the security deposit and last month's rent I had been saving to break my lease and move out. I confirmed the donation. The weight on my chest didn't vanish, but it shifted. It became something different, something lighter. It was no longer the weight of vengeance. It was the weight of a choice, a terrible choice I had made, and a better one I was trying to make now. I would still move. I needed a fresh start, away from the accusing silence of these walls. I'd find a cheaper place, a smaller place. It would be a setback, but a manageable one. A few days later, I saw an update from Skylar on the fundraiser page. I am completely overwhelmed, she wrote. An anonymous donor contributed an incredible amount. This means I can actually afford my first semester of classes and help with my legal fees. I don't know who you are, but thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. You have given me a second chance I don't deserve, and I promise I will not waste it. I closed the browser. Outside, the afternoon was quiet. The silence was no longer a judgment. It was just silence. It was neutral. It was mine to fill. My revenge had been perfectly, terribly sweet. But it had turned to ash in my mouth. This act of secret restitution, of twisted, anonymous grace. It left a different taste. It wasn't sweet. It was complex and bitter and hopeful. It was the taste of a future, for both of us, that was finally quiet enough to hear ourselves think and to maybe, eventually, find a way to forgive. The end.